Hello, everybody. It's Friday. Yes. Awesome. I slept all day, so I'm a little bit late today. It's just like really rainy here where I live. And when it gets really rainy, I get super sleepy. I could never live in like Seattle, Washington or something like that. Actually, I remember I was at a research station one summer in Colorado, and they have a rainy season. I don't know how long it lasts. I was there for 10 weeks. So the rainy season was maybe like a few weeks long. And man, I'd never left my cabin. I just slept and slept every day. And I had a little gaming system called a Sony PSP, PlayStation Portable. And I went to the laboratory, the computer lab, and I downloaded Walking Dead comic books. And so I just slept in my cabin and read Walking Dead comics for the whole rainy season. And then I had to explain to my mentor why I was missing for several weeks. Hey, Melinda, thank you for being here. I was just explaining how I slept all day because it's hurricane season in Texas, and it's been raining and ugly all day, and that makes me sleepy. That's the way it is. Okay. So thank you for being here, Melinda. Let's get into the paper. I'm excited because we're reading this paper that gives evidence for psi ability, psychic ability, clairvoyance, telepathy, psychokinesis. And we're right at the part of the paper where they're going to start talking about how it works with physics and biology and psychology. So without further ado, let's start reading about this paper. So, all right, there you go. Okay, let me fix this. Cool. Then we're good to go. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Okay, so let me just go to where we were. I remember where we were. We talked about the domain of psi research. And here we go. Psi phenomenon and its theories. All right, cool. All right, here we go. What else was I going to say? Yeah, the link for this paper will be in the description if you want to read it yourself at your own leisure. It's always available there for you. So, okay, without further ado, let's see. It's a little bit bigger. Just getting everything ready here. Let me drink some water. All right. Psi phenomenon and physics theories. Because psi phenomenon are sometimes assumed a priori to violate physics principles, already we're going to do some vocabulary. Okay. What does priori mean? I'm going to guess priori means assumed I have no idea. Maybe it's because I slept all day, but let's find out. Priori means wow, it's a long one. Okay. It's an adjective. It means relating to or denoting reasoning or knowledge which proceeds from theoretical deduction rather than from observation or experience. A priori assumptions about human nature in a way based on theoretical deduction rather than empirical observation. Sexuality may be a factor, but it cannot be assumed a priori. A way based on theoretical deduction rather than empirical observation. Noting or knowledge which proceeds from deduction. Okay. So it's saying that this is reasoning or knowledge that comes from theoretical deduction and not from observation. Okay, I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. Let's see. Let's make sure. All right. Theoretical deduction means involving deductive reasoning from a general principle to a necessary effect, not supported by fact. There's that word again. Okay, so it's something based on a hypothesis or theory rather than an experiment. Okay. And then let's see, deduction right here is a form of logical reasoning that derives a conclusion from a set of premises, and the conclusion cannot be false if the premises are true. Okay, interesting. So what I'm getting from this is that nobody's really tested it, but just based on our knowledge, like what we know, our assumptions about physics, it means that psi phenomenon are just thought to violate physics. They're taught to go against physics. Nobody's really done experiments. It's just like, from what we understand of physics, psi phenomenon cannot be real, although we haven't tested it. Okay, Melinda, my co-host, pipes in with a helpful comment. She says another term to go with priori is a posteriori. Posteriori, which is knowledge depends on empirical evidence. Okay, so is that like the opposite? So posteriori means that you need empirical evidence, like from an experiment, whereas priori means you don't need physical observations or evidence. It's just, we're just assuming it based on what we know. All right, that's a good word. Thank you for that, Melinda. Okay. Okay, 3 common objections will be discussed. All right, 3 objections to psi theory. Why it can't be real, why it violates physics principles. Okay, namely that, number 1, they violate the quote unquote laws of nature. All right, that's a big one. Starting off with a big one. If accepted, they would invalidate scientific achievements. Whoa, that's another big one. Okay. Number 3, there are no theories to account for them. All right, those are really 3 big objections to psi theory. Number 1, that they violate the laws of nature. Basically, the common big things we understand about nature, they go against those things. And then if we accept the side that they would invalidate scientific achievements or make them not valid anymore, make them not true, that's a big one. And there are no theories to account for them. In other words, there's no explanation for why psi might work. That's what I understand here. And I guess this is true. Yeah, if you were to ask an average scientist, they would probably tell you these are 3 reasons why psi theory is not legitimate. Okay. What is often meant by psi critics as violations of the laws of nature involves assumptions about an event not being able to affect another at a distance without some mediating form of known energy. Okay. So what is often meant by psi critics as violations of the laws of nature. So when they say that psi violates the law of nature, number 1, what they're saying is they're assuming that an event is not able to affect another at a distance without some mediating form of energy. So a lot of psi involves, like wireless communication. So telepathy, you're being affected by someone's thoughts or emotions, or clairvoyance, you're seeing an event without it being there. So there's a distance between you and the person or the event, but they're saying there has to be some kind of energy to transfer that. And they're saying with psi, people don't give an energy. This is kind of like how a radio works. Radio is a form of, wireless communication. You have your radio, you're receiving a signal from a radio tower, but there is a form of mediating energy, which is radio waves. But anyway, future events being unable to affect previous ones. Okay, so now they're saying that another way that psi violates the laws of nature is that if this is true, then that would mean that future events, they're saying that future events, they're saying it can't be true because future events are unable to affect previous ones. So they're saying that as we understand nature, as we understand time, time goes from the past to the present to the future. It does not go from the future to the past. So right now, everything we do is affecting the future. Everything I do today has a direct impact on the future. But what the critics are saying is that the future is unable to affect the previous events. Okay, that makes sense. And so they're referring to like telepathy, a clairvoyance, I think. Being able to see future events. I think that's what they're referring to. And mental events not having direct effects on other than the organism privy to them. Okay, and they're saying that mental events or your thoughts, basically your emotions, they're saying they don't have direct effects on anything else other than the organism privy to them. So they're saying that their understanding of the world and the laws of nature say that your mental events, which are your thoughts and emotions, they only really affect the organism. That's you. So if a dog is thinking something, that only affects a dog. If you're thinking something, that only affects you. If an octopus is thinking something, it only affects them. Uh-oh, here we go. Dropping the big word, quantum mechanics. However, quantum mechanics, or from now on it'll be called QM, and Einstein's theory of relativity depicted a reality that differs substantially from commonsensical assumptions. All right, well, that's a good point. So they're saying that quantum mechanics, let's just look that up real fast, just to give you a definition of what is quantum mechanics. Okay. So quantum mechanics is a branch of mechanics that deals with mathematical description of the motion and interaction of subatomic particles. We talked a lot about subatomic particles. So basically matter, what we interact with, what we breathe in, the air, what we touch, a lot of what we see is made of matter. And matter is matter, from the matter that we know of. This list is growing. It has been growing, and it will probably grow. But this is basically it right here. This is the periodic table of elements. So from what we understand, this is basically the ingredient list for physical reality. There's all these things right here. And so, I mean, we're familiar with a lot of them every day. So here's oxygen, of course. We need that to survive, to breathe. Aluminum, that's what we drink our beer out of. That's a metal. And what else? See, what else are some big ones? Helium, what we fill our balloons with. I mean, helium is also used for other stuff. Calcium, big component of our bodies and our bones. Hydrogen is a really big one. And platinum, silver, gold, mercury, copper, iron. So we know a lot of these. But anyway, this is what matter is made of, all this stuff. And basically, these are made of atoms. So, oxygen is made of atoms of oxygen. But that atom of oxygen is broken down into smaller things, like they're called protons, electrons, and neutrons. And then those little things are broken down into even smaller things, which are like quarks, I believe, subatomic particles. So quantum mechanics deals with the motion of these very, very small parts of matter, subatomic particles, incorporating the concepts of quantization of energy, wave particle duality, the uncertainty principle, and the correspondence principle. Interesting. Okay. So Melinda says, think back 2,000 years ago. What was the scientific knowledge and laws? Pretty goofy, right? And couldn't they say that at the time? For example, gravity is caused by the gods and anything else violates science. So yeah, Melinda is saying a really good point about science. So unfortunately, a lot of science have forgotten this concept, but it's one of the most fundamental concepts about science, is that science is self-correcting and it changes. Nothing in science is written in stone, and we all accept that things can change. You know, I used to work at a museum, and I would give tours at the Science Museum, and I would say, look, there's a strong possibility that everything you read in the museum today will in the future be proven incorrect, you know? So does that mean we were wrong? Yes, it means we were wrong, but it doesn't mean we were doing anything wrong. It's just that at this current time, this is the best understanding we have of the world, and we accept it. But we also accept that in the future that might change, and we have to be open to that idea. So what a lot of scientists do now is they are not open to that idea. They're closed off to the idea when there's radical things out there like psiability or UFOs being from a non-human origin. They are blocking out that idea. But here's the example that, 2,000 years ago, the things we believed scientifically were really goofy. But now we understand that they changed. So Melinda goes on to say, therefore, the scientific knowledge we have today says psi violates scientific rules and laws. Correct. Until we learn more and make leaps and bounds in our knowledge. Correct. And then Melinda says, wave-particle duality is either a particle or a wave at any given moment. Yeah, so that's another aspect of quantum mechanics, is this wave-particle duality, meaning that, I guess, quantum subatomic particles, like electrons, which make up atoms, they could at any time be acting as a particle or a wave, which is very interesting. So basically, quantum mechanics is accepted by a lot of scientists. However, a lot of this is very radical thinking, just like psi is. That's what he's saying. And also that Einstein's theory of relativity. Let's look that up real fast. Let's see. Einstein's theory of relativity definition. So the author's giving these two things as examples of like really radical ways of thinking that seem to violate what we think. Let's see. So here's an example from NBC News, the best place to get your science news. What is general relativity? Essentially, it's a theory of gravity. The basic idea is that instead of being an invisible force that attracts objects to one another, gravity is a curving or warping of space. The more massive an object, the more it warps the space around it. Oh, that's a pretty cool way of describing the theory of gravity. Yeah, so basically, what is gravity, right? Like if you jump up on Earth, if you're on Earth and you jump up in the air, you're not going to keep going up in the air. You will fall back down, and that could be measurable, and we could predict how fast you will fall down. That is gravity. Now, I guess before the theory of gravity, before the general relativity theory that Einstein had, people thought that what was happening when you jump up on Earth, as an example, was an invisible force that attracts one object to the other. In this case, they thought there was an invisible force that attracted the Earth to you or you to the Earth. But Einstein came in and he's saying that gravity instead is a curving or warping of space. And the more massive an object is, like the Earth, the more it warps space around it. That's a pretty simplified view of that. Okay. So yeah, so quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of relativity have depicted a reality that differs substantially from commonsensical assumptions. Nobel laureate and pioneer of molecular biology, Max Delbruck, 1986 is when he said this quote, expressed it so, in quotes, modern science has forced us to abandon absolute space and time, determinism, and the absolute object. Interesting. Very cool. All right. Non-locality. What is non-locality? In his interpretation of quantum mechanics, or QM, and experts differ on how to interpret it. For example, enlist some scientists, like an eminent physicist. So people, it sounds like quantum mechanics is in its infancy. It's not. We're barely understanding it. So there are some scientists or physicists who understand quantum mechanics or the mechanics of subatomic or very small particles differently. But in his interpretation, of quantum mechanics, discussed the implications of experiments showing that measuring or observing the property of a particle, such as its spin, instantaneously determines that of another particle entangled with it, no matter how distant. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I think they're talking about Max, Mr. Max Delbruck. So in Max Delbruck's interpretation of quantum mechanics, let me see quotes, discuss the implications of experiments showing that when you measure or observe the property of a particle can be like an atom, or it could be an electron, a subatomic particle, or a proton or a neutron. So when you start using an instrument to measure or to observe these subatomic particles, such as their spin, how they're spinning, that instantaneously determines that of another particle entangled with it, no matter how distant. Interesting. Yeah, I think what they're saying here, we're getting into physics, and I'm a biologist, but I have read a little bit about this. I think they're basically saying that they're talking about this particle entanglement. So they're basically saying that it's possible to have a particle like an electron become entangled with another electron, so they're forever connected to each other, and you could separate them from a very large distance. So an example, I could have these two electrons, which are entangled, have one on Earth, and then, have one in Japan, and have one in Russia, and then if I measure the spin of one of them, then instantaneously the spin of the other one that's far away is also the same. So basically, they're communicating instantaneously, which should not be possible. It's faster than light travel, basically. So entanglement means that the quantum states of such particles are not independent, but part of a system. So yeah, they're saying that, so what this entanglement means is that the quantum states of a particle, so the state of a very small scale particles, they're not independent. That means they're not, by themselves, but they're part of a system which can be produced in different ways. So yeah, they're part of a much more complex system, like being entangled. Hey, Mr. Crowley, thank you for being here. Stopping to say hi. Hey, man, stopping by to say hi. Got a birthday party live. I have to run off shortly. Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. I sure appreciate seeing you here. I hope you're doing very well, Mr. Crowley. Always happy to see you here. All right. Okay. So he's another scientist called D. Spagnant. He concluded that such experiments falsify the local realist theory that effects cannot propagate faster than light, and that objects far apart in space are relatively independent. Okay. So what this scientist said is that these experiments that we were just talking about, they falsify the theory, they make false the theory that we used to have, that an effect cannot propagate faster than the speed of light, and that objects far apart are independent. So basically they're saying that effects can move faster than the speed of light because of this entanglement, and that goes against what we believed previously, and that's a big deal. Entanglement means that effects can travel faster than the speed of light instantaneously, and it means that objects that are far apart or relatively independent, things that were far apart in space were thought to be independent, but actually they're not. They could be affected by each other. So yeah, that's cool. For him, the world is not made of separate, in quotes, material objects embedded in space-time, but of a non-separable, indivisible field of veiled reality, with which consciousness interacts with. Interesting. Okay, so I guess previously, what a lot of people thought, and maybe even the scientists, people thought that the world was made of separate material objects embedded in space and time. So basically, I'm a separate object, the dog is a separate object, you're a separate object, and we're all just stuck in space and time all over the universe. And that's what we used to think. But now we're actually non-separable, so we're actually not divided. We're all connected together as a whole. Uh, uh, we're indivisible. Embedded, but of a non-separable, indivisible field of reality. Okay, so basically, there's a indivisible means okay. So there's one field that cannot be divided. I believe that's what indivisible means, and that is not separate, and that is what's called veiled reality. Basically, that we're all really connected, much closer than we thought, is what the scientist is saying. And furthermore, that consciousness interacts with this veiled reality field. Consciousness is our thoughts. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let me make sure indivisible. I believe indivisible means not being able to divide. Let's check. I kind of see where he's going with psi now. He's kind of set it up. Yeah, unable to be divided or separated. Okay. So there's this idea that this one scientist have, and I believe the author agrees with this, that our reality is called a veiled reality. And what's actually happening is that this reality is non-separable. So everything is connected always. Everything is connected to everything else. This field cannot be separated or broken up. It's always one large field, and that consciousness can connect that field. So in other words, like I'm connected to something happening on Saturn. You're connected to something happening on the moon or in another country. That's what the scientist is saying. That is his view of reality, which is different than the previous definition or view of reality that a lot of people have. And that makes sense to me. I could see now how psi-ability might work now. If this is true, if we're all connected, then yeah, I could see how that would work. It's like we're all part of a whole. So it's not that impossible for me to communicate wirelessly with someone else's mind, because we're not actually separated. We're connected. We're embedded in the same fabric of veiled reality. Okay. So he concluded that the implications of quantum mechanics and transcendentalism inclined thinkers have points in common, as did renowned physicist David Bohm in his theory of the implicate order of guiding field, which he applied to psi phenomenon. Interesting. What is transcendentalism? So he's saying that people who study quantum mechanics, they have things in common with thinkers who also think about transcendentalism. Let's see what that is. What is transcendentalism? Let's see. All right, so transcendentalism. Bobby comes in with one with nature. Interesting. One with nature. That's a good way of defining it. Oh, man, there's a lot of them here. Let's read this little one. Number 2, a system developed by Immanuel Kant based on the idea that in order to understand the nature of reality, one must first examine and analyze the reasoning process which govern the nature of experience. Interesting. In order to understand the nature of reality, okay, one must first examine and analyze the reasoning process which governs the nature of experience. Here we go. What is a simple definition of transcendentalism? Transcendentalism is a very formal word that describes a very simple idea. People, men and women equally, have knowledge about themselves and the world around them that transcends or goes beyond what they can see, hear, taste, touch, or feel. Okay, cool. Thank you for being here, Bobby. All right. Okay. Scientific American journalist George Musser also supported a non-local interpretation of quantum mechanics and considered space a doomed concept. Okay. He also described how effects violating assumptions of locality do not occur exclusively at the particle, but also at the cosmic level, or the very large scale level, and at the meso level of living beings. Okay, what does meso level mean? Meso level. Oh. Mr. Crowley says, enter my practice, Buddhism. Yeah, these do sound like a lot of Buddhist ideas, for sure. Okay, mesolevel. In general, a mesolevel analysis indicates a population size that falls between the micro and macro, so in between, such as a community or an organization. Oh, okay. However, mesolevel may also refer to analyses that are specifically designed to reveal connections between micro and macro levels. All right. Okay. So, okay, Melinda says Ralph Waldo Emerson, an author, and Henry David Thoreau were central figures in Transcendentalism. Ah, cool. All right. Okay, let's see. Okay, so yeah, this author from Scientific American said that so the effects that violate locality do not occur exclusively at the particle level. So this scientist is saying, like, these ideas we're just talking about right now about things being affect things from like faster than light travel, everything being connected and not actually separate. This not only happens at the super small scale, like at a particle, but also at the very large levels, cosmic level, like universes, solar systems, and planets. And also at the meso level of living beings, like humans, like a country, like a group of people. Okay. Along these lines, Princeton physicist, philosopher Hans Halvorson concluded that a form of super entanglement links every aspect of everything in the universe. Oh, interesting. So there's this idea that everything is connected. Interesting. That's very interesting. This idea that everything is connected, that there really is no separation. Everything is part of one whole. I think that's what he's saying. That is a very radical idea, but I could see some positive implications. It's like saying, like, look, I'm not going to hate another person because that person is part of me and I'm part of them. I'm not going to hate another object. I'm not going to hate another country. I'm not going to hate a rock or a shark because we're all super entangled. We're all just really part of the same thing. There is no separation. Okay. In principle, thus, psi phenomenon such as sudden death affecting a loved one at another location. Here's an example. So somebody dies and then their loved one who's very far away suddenly knows about it. I've heard about this happening. Like, it shows my age, I guess. But if you watch Jackass, the TV show and the movie series, one of the jackasses, they're a bunch of what is it called? Stuntmen, I guess you could call it, daredevils. Anyway, one of the guys was named Bam Margera, and the other guy was named Ryan Dunn. They were super close friends since they were children. Ryan Dunn got in a car accident and died, and his friend Bam Margera, he said he was very far away in another state, but at the same time, he got super angry and he just got upset. He started punching a car, and so basically, the sudden death of Ryan Dunn affected Bam Margera, even though they're far away. Yeah, and then Mr. Crowley says we are all one. Yeah, man, that is a very Buddhist way of thinking, and I don't know, it's a very reassuring way of thinking to me. It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't make me worried like some other things, like the idea of black-eyed children or of gray aliens being able to go in our bedroom and abduct us. Those are kind of scary thoughts. But yeah, just the thought that we're all one, that's actually kind of a comforting thought to me. All right. Let's see. Okay, so in principle, psi phenomenon, such as a sudden death affecting a loved one at another location, are consistent with a non-local view of the universe. Furthermore, as compared with classical physics, which depicts a universe where everything is determined by previous causes, quantum mechanics proposes that before there is a collapse of the quantum wave function by some type of measurement, objects are only probability functions. Interesting. Bobby says, not nearly as serious as, but whenever one of my kids gets sick at school, I always have a heavy, uneasy feeling and worry about them. Oh, that's very sweet, Bobby. But yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, so that is a form of non-local communication. How are you feeling this? Probably a form of psi is what the author is trying to indicate here. Interesting. Okay. So then they say here that, let me read this again. Okay, so compared to classical physics, or what a lot of people still believe or used to think, the previous thought, or the old-fashioned thought, depicts a universe where everything is determined by a previous cause. So everything that happened because something happened before it. I'm hungry because I didn't eat in the past. But quantum mechanics proposes that before there is a collapse of the quantum wave function by some type of measurement, objects are only probability functions. Interesting. I think what he's saying is that when you measure a subatomic particle, then there is a collapse of the wave function. So basically, when you're measuring a particle to see whether it's a wave or a particle, it collapses that probability. So right before you measure it, it could be either one, a particle or a wave. But as soon as you measure it, it collapses and it picks one. It either becomes observed as a particle or a wave. But before you measure it, it's a probability function. So it could be either or both. Interesting. Okay. And Bobby also says, before my wife tells me they got sick. Yeah. So Bobby's giving an example that he knows when his children are sick, even before he's told about it. And great connection with Bobby Disley. Yeah. Bobby's a great father. Okay. In parapsychology, observational theories propose that psi experiments exploit the intermediacy of a system, which may become slightly biased by intention of an observer, or, as the scientist Stapp put it, by, in quotes, relevant conditions that include the experienced emotions of biological agents. All right, this is a pretty thick sentence. Okay, so in parapsychology, which is the study of psi phenomenon, observational theories propose that psi experiments, when you're doing a psi experiment, you exploit the indeterminacy. I'm sorry, I must have said this differently. Okay, indeterminacy, or means something is up in the air. It's not determined to be something for sure. It's like when somebody asks you to go to a party at a later date, you're kind of indeterminate. You're like, yeah, maybe. You really don't know. You haven't determined if you're going to go or not. But so they're saying that these experiments for psi connections, they're exploiting or making use of the indeterminacy of the system, which may become slightly biased by the intention of the observer, or another way of putting it, relative conditions that include the experienced emotions of a biological agent. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Still wrapping my head around that one. Let's see. Let's go over here. I don't know, man. This author's making me a believer in psi ability. He's very good at setting it up. All right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about time. So earlier, that section seemed to be mostly about quantum mechanics. So yeah, it's set up how psi could work based on quantum mechanics. Basically, we have shown, because of quantum entanglement, that two things that are very separated can transfer information at faster than light travel or speeds. All right. So if that's being done, then that sounds a lot like psi-ability, basically. That makes sense. Okay. Time. Einstein's theory of time and the ensuing experiments demonstrated that objectively measured time and space are not absolute and depend on such variables as the position and speed of the observers and the gravitational field. For instance, events that are still in the future of a slow-moving individual may have already occurred to a faster-moving one. Okay, I think I could describe this. Okay. So, for instance, events that are still in the future of a slow-moving individual may have already occurred to a fast-moving individual. Interesting. Okay, so yeah, I think what they're saying is that, like, basically, if you were to travel, I think you're talking about time dilation, which I talk a lot about, and which I actually think that a lot of missing time is due to what they're saying here. So basically, as an example, if you were to travel very fast, let's say you were in a spaceship. There's a lot of reasons why this can happen, but this is just why this can't happen. This is an example. Let's say you were in a spaceship, and that spaceship was going so fast that you were approaching the speed of light. Speed of light is how fast light travels. So as an example, the speed of light, it takes light. If you were traveling this fast, it would take you 8 minutes to go to the sun. And as you could imagine, the sun is very far, and 8 minutes is not a very large amount of time. If you were traveling this fast, and you were comparing yourself to someone who is not traveling this fast, then time for you would move faster than for them. So that means that, let's say you spend 1 minute traveling this speed in the spaceship. Well, then for you, you would have only aged 1 minute, but for the other person, then they might have aged 40 years, as an example. So basically, time is not the same for everybody. Time can be different for individuals. It depends on variables such as the position and speed of the observer and the gravitational field. Okay, I think I described that pretty well. All right, let's see. Melinda says, the probability function of the quantum wave is illustrated by Schrodinger's cat, which is a thought experiment in quantum mechanics. The cat is both alive and dead as a result of its fate linked to a random subatomic event that may or may not occur. Interesting. Very cool. Thank you for that example. Mr. Crowley says, once again, Buddhism. There is only now. There is no future. It's already past. We are here now. Where will you be this time next week? Here now, 3 months from now, here now. He says, the past and the future don't exist. Only right here and now. Okay, very cool. That makes perfect sense. All right, very interesting. Once again, Buddhism, there is only now, no future. It already passed. We are here now. Where will you be the next time week? Interesting. Very cool. Well, it looks like Buddhism was ahead of the curve as far as all of these quantum mechanic ideas. Mr. Crowley says, I just discovered it this year. You fight the river of time. You will end up now. Interesting. Okay. So basically, time is a lot more complicated than we think. It's not as simple as, yeah. Okay, let's see. Furthermore, in the special relativity block universe theory, furthermore, in the special relativity block universe theory of time, past, present, and future coexist simultaneously, although we experience only the present. Oh, that sounds like a lot like what Mr. Crowley just said. So the past, present, and future coexist simultaneously, although we experience only the present. All right. And to add to that, Mr. Crowley says, time is something humans manufactured. Yes, good to remember, especially when I, as many people do, worry about the future or dwell on the past. Being just in the now is much more peaceful. Yeah. What is that called? That's called, there's a way of thinking that helps you. There's a type of therapy that involves just living in the present. I forget what that's called. Okay, but yeah. Okay. Despite our typical perception of time as only an ever-receding series of moments, experiments on quantum retrocausality or backwards causation, or something in the future causing something in the past, which is opposite of something in the present causing something in the future. Or another ways of saying it is, so retrocausality is, something in the present causing something in the past. So experiments about quantum retrocausality suggest that future events may affect previous ones. For example, measuring the spin of a particle which collapses its probabilistic wave function into a deterministic value seems to retroactively determine the spin of a delayed photon entangled with it. Okay. So, but once again, looking at how we are thinking about time and how we measure these particles, it does seem like when you do something in the present, it can affect the past, which goes against what a lot of people assume about time, which is only that the past affects the future or the present affects the future, not the opposite. So then physicist Daniel Sheenan concluded that experiments in physics and psi supports retrocognitive effects. And physicist and parapsychologist Edwin May has developed a theory in which signals from a future space-time point, such as having eventual knowledge of the target of an experiment, may affect previous cortical processes of those trying to guess it. An alternate explanation is that consciousness may bias a future event. All right. That's very interesting. All right. Mr. Crowley says, if we worried about the now and stop concentrating on the past or what might happen in the future, we could actually get shit done. I like this way of thinking. Mr. Crowley says, sorry, you don't have to apologize, Mr. Crowley. I always appreciate your feedback. It's always very valuable. No need to apologize. Okay, so Melinda went ahead and looked up the theory, present moment awareness. Okay, so this is to cultivate unself-consciousness. Let go and stop thinking. Practice savoring. Avoid worrying about the future. Focus on your breath and allow mindfulness. Yeah, mindfulness is also the thought I was thinking about. Very cool. This is really interesting. Yeah, let's all take a deep breath. Let's all breathe in through our nose 3 times, and let's breathe out our mouth, and let's just try to quiet our minds. Very peaceful. You know, this mindfulness is hard for a lot of us to do in our present world. It's hard to not think. It's hard to not worry about the future. It's hard to just live in the moment. But I've heard that it's incredibly beneficial to your health. I have a funny story about how this happened. I was forced to do this. Once again, I was in Colorado doing high altitude research. I was at about like 10 to 11,000 feet in elevation. And when you go that high and you're not used to it, there's less oxygen available to your lungs. So when I was there, I was literally forced. It was a great feeling, but I was literally forced to only think about one thought at a time. I think I just did not have enough oxygen to entertain this random chatter of thoughts in my head. Like literally, there was just not enough oxygen. There was not enough fuel for my brain. So it was wonderful. I was only thinking about one thought at a time. And no matter what I did, I couldn't think of more than one thought. It was beautiful. So Melinda says, I have been practicing being in the moment over the past few years. It's a process, but I'm getting better at it. I feel so much better when I get in that zone of the present. Mr. Crowley says, mindfulness. is what should be taught in every school year. Just had this conversation on another live stream. I try to teach my 10-year-old to practice mindfulness, Melinda says. Do deep breathing. I think it's something to be taught to young age to develop it. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I agree. These are great thoughts. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about consciousness and sentience. All right. One of the interpretations of quantum mechanics requires that the measurement that makes a wave function of probabilities collapse into a determinate outcome be made by a sentient observer. Okay. One of the interpretations of quantum mechanics requires that the measurement that makes a wave function of probabilities collapse into a determinate outcome be made by a sentient observer. So they're saying that in order, this particle, when it's existing on its own, it's existing as a probability, a function of probabilities. It could either be a wave or a particle. But in order for it to collapse or pick just one lane to be in, that has to be done by the observation of a sentient observer, like a human, for instance. Okay, so consistent with a causal role for sentience, the scientist Dilbruck criticized the, in quotes, Cartesian cut between mind and matter. And cognitive psychologist Max Velmans also discussed the reasons why a hard distinction between objective and subjective phenomenon is misguided. Interesting. Okay, so these scientists are saying that they don't like this Cartesian cut. I believe Cartesian is like this coordinate system, like where graphs are displayed, the XY coordinate system. So he's saying that he doesn't like this line that separates your mind or your consciousness and matter, which is basically physical reality. Okay, and this other scientist is saying the same thing. So these scientists and the author of the paper, I believe, is trying to make the point that there really is no hard distinction between your thoughts and the physical reality around you. Okay, let's see. Melinda says, slow, deep breathing helps lower glucocorticoids in your blood. These cause stress. Okay, very cool. Oh, my kitty just came in. Oh, hey, kitty. You want to say hi to everybody? You want to give a little meow meow? You want to give a meow? How are you doing? You want to purr? Okay. Spending time with my cat also reduces glucocorticoids in my blood. So Mr. Crowley's talking about what I was describing as radio chatter. It's okay to lose focus while meditating. Just bring yourself back to the breathing. Okay. It's scientifically proven that meditation improves your mental health. Yes. And Mr. Crowley has 6 minutes. No problem. Okay, so Belinda says, yes, I've heard that about meditation, and Mr. Crowley. I've tried it over the years, but I haven't had much success with it. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Meditation is hard to do. It's hard to just start doing for me. And then Melinda says, I heard the kitty meow. I had cognitive dissonance, thought it was one of my cats. Yeah, she just walked in the room to say a little hello, to introduce herself. Okay, and then Mr. Crowley gets some advice for anybody who wants to meditate. Look up Lama Surya Das meditation. Mr. Crowley says it may help. All right, very cool. All right, let's see. Let me drink some water here. All right. Renowned philosopher of mind, Thomas Nagel, concluded that the explanatory gap between neurochemical processes and mental experiences is difficult to resolve from a materialist evolutionary perspective, and that reality is not reducible to material, mental, or functional realms, but subsumes them all. Subsumes. What is subsumes? Let's see. Include or observe. Okay, so to include. Okay, so yeah, they're saying that concluded that the explanatory gap between neurochemical processes, mental experience is difficult to resolve. Okay, so basically they're saying that there's a gap between our understanding of neurochemical processes, basically in our brain. There's, we understand there's tissue there. There's different types of cells like neurons. There's different types of chemicals. We understand that. We also understand that we have mental experiences like imagination and emotions, and that we could, calculate things and we can remember things, but that we can't really make the connection between these weird chemical processes and the experiences. And that gap is difficult to resolve or to solve from a materialistic, or a lot of scientists are materialistic. They view things as all about matter. Everything has to do with the things in the periodic table, evolutionary perspective, and that reality is not reducible. So they're saying that, the scientists are saying that our experiences of reality, we cannot just we cannot describe it by just looking at it from a material perspective, or by looking at the different types of elements that make up reality, or by the mental realm, what's going on in our mind, or the functional realm. But we have to include all of these things as one whole. Let's see. What does he mean by functional realms? Let's see. Functional realms. Let's see. Not sure. Let's see. What about just functional? Okay, Mr. Crowley says he's going to go. He's got to go to his party, and he will come back and rewatch. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your contribution. Functional means designed to be practical or useful rather than attractive. Okay. Over having a special activity, purpose, or task relating to the way in which something works or operates. Okay. Let's see what else. So yeah, Mr. Crowley was just saying that meditation is hard, very hard. Melissa says, glad to hear it's not just my shortcoming with meditation. And Mr. Crowley says, you all keep your focus, live what feels right to you. That's your path. We all can't walk the same one, but we can hold hands. Good night, Mr. Trees. Crowley, see you next time, and have a great Labor Day weekend. Cool. All right. Okay, so then Princeton physicist Freeman Dyson ascribed different levels of mind from the particle to the cosmic levels. Okay, so there's different levels of the mind from the particle all the way to the cosmic. Okay, so this physicist from Princeton is saying that the mind is actually existing at different levels, all the way from the particle, like the atom, or the neutron, or the electron, all the way to cosmic levels, like the universe. And Vellman's, another scientist, concluded that a continuous model of sentience is more parsimonious than one proposing that mentality just emerges from matter at some level of complexity. Parsimonious, I believe parsimonious means it just makes things make sense. Parsimonious means unwilling to spend money or use resources. Oh, okay. Being frugal. Let me see. I was really wrong on this one. Let's see. What does it mean if something is parsimonious? This is a really good show. If anybody's going to take the SAT or the GRE or some kind of qualifying exam. Frugal, sparing, or restrained. Okay. So Velman's concluded that the continuous model of sentience is more parsimonious. Okay. More parsimonious. Let me see. Frugal, sparing, or restrained. So more restrained. So he's saying that a continuous model of sentience is more restrained than one proposing that mentality just emerges from matter. Yeah. Melinda also totally didn't think that's what parsimonious meant. Me neither. So if I'm reading this correctly and the definition is correctly, so a continuous model of sentience, or like a broader or more large scale, or more correct, I believe the author is saying, model of sentience or consciousness is more frugal, more restrained than one proposing that mentality just emerges from matter at some level of complexity. So yeah, a lot of people think that mentality or being able to have a consciousness, it just emerges from matter when you have some form of complexity. So for example, a lot of people think like, well, if you just have a bunch of atoms of carbon and oxygen, well, that's not very complex. You're not going to have consciousness. But once you have a brain with all these different chemicals and connections and cells, that's much more complex, and that's when you have a consciousness. But Velmans is saying that perhaps it's better to have a continuous model where you don't have to have all that complexity. You could have less complexity, but you could also have a lot of complexity. It's a big scale. Okay. To add eminent neuroscientists to those who endorse non-materialistic views of the mind, Christoph Koch, an earlier collaborator of arc reductionist Francis Crick, okay, concluded with Giulio Tononi that consciousness is a fundamental property of information in complex entities. Interesting. Consciousness is a fundamental property of information in complex entities. Oh, okay. So, yeah, what we were thinking is parsimony. All things being equal, you should prefer the simplest explanation of a phenomenon. Parsimony. Do you think? Yeah, we were thinking of parsimony. So I think they're meaning parsimonious in reference to what definition I gave. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. So yeah, they mean all things being equal, you should prefer the simplest explanation. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it was just the dictionaries that we read that were wrong, or I just read the wrong definition. All right. All right. Okay, but how might, in quotes, mental events interact with physical ones? All right, so how might what's going on in your brain, how might your thoughts react with physical things, like the moving of an object, assuming that they differ ontologically? Okay, I've seen this word before. Ontologic means showing the relations between the concepts and categories in an area. Okay. Relating to a branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. Oh yeah, we looked up that before already. The nature of being. Okay, so yeah, so how can your mental thoughts affect the physical reality, assuming that they differ in the nature of being? They're so different. They're so different from each other, or so we think. University of London professor of mathematics and cosmology, Bernard Carr, has described recent hyperspatial or hyperdimensional approaches that posit additional dimensions beyond the temporal and three spatial ones. Okay. So this London professor of mathematics and cosmology named Bernard Carr has described recent hyperspatial and hyperdimensional approaches that posit additional dimensions beyond the temporal, which is time, or three spatial ones. Okay, so this scientist is basically talking about different approaches of looking at the world that don't deal with just length, width, and height, and not just time. So additional dimensions, more than four dimensions. Okay, he proposes that events that seem to be distant or in our three-dimensional space may be adjacent in a hyperdimensional one. Okay, so things that are happening that seem to be happening very far away in our three-dimensional space may actually be really close to each other in, or right next to each other in a hyperdimensional dimension, hyperdimensional space, okay? And that dichotomy between mind and matter of common sense is resolved by a hyperdimensional transcendental field in which mental phenomenon can have causal effects. Okay. My cat is having a really hard time getting comfortable. I don't know if these thoughts are disturbing her brain. Perhaps she does not like to think about new ways. She's comfortable thinking about the old way of physics and about consciousness, and these thoughts are disturbing her, and so she's having a hard time becoming comfortable. Or maybe I'm just talking really loud in her little kitty ear. But yeah, so the scientist was proposing that the dichotomy, I believe di means two, dichotomy. So maybe the separation of two things. Yeah, a division contrasting two things. They're represented as being opposed. Okay, yeah. So the hard distinction between the mind and the matter, that is resolved by the hyperdimensional transcendental field in which mental phenomenon can have causal effects. Yeah, I think perhaps the kitty did not like Melinda's Schrodinger's cat comment. Yeah, cats don't like that one. They're like, why can't it be a dog? Schrodinger's dog. Okay. So basically, this scientist is talking about how basically there could be more dimensions than we normally think about. And these extra dimensions could be why matter can affect reality. Basically, let's see, where was I? Okay, I think over here. Nope, down here. Okay, here we go. All right. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory physicist Henry P. Stapp. Yeah, Melinda says, what's up with that? Was Schrodinger not a cat person? Not cool. Yeah, cats rule. Dogs are cool too. But yeah. But cats are my preferred pet, domesticated pet. Livermore National Laboratory physicist Henry P. Stapp has developed a realistically construed orthodox quantum mechanics model in which conscious intentions can produce a small bias on quantum processes. And indeed, research has shown significant small effects of intention on photon wave particles. I didn't know that. And then here's a study that was done in 2016. Interesting. So your intentions, your thinking can produce a small bias on quantum processes. And indeed, research has shown significant small effects of intention on a photon's wave pattern. Whoa, that's pretty crazy. That's really blowing my mind. Oh man, my mind's being blown. But yeah, it sounds like basically your mind can affect, your thoughts can affect uh, reality. Yeah, I think Melinda's also being hit by this statement that we just read. Whoa, that's heavy. Intentions produce bias on quantum processes. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Melinda. I'm like rereading that. I'm like, interesting. Let me just see what that study is called. This is Radin and Michael. Let's see. Here it is right here. Okay. So that study that was referring to, it came out in 2016. The title of that paper was Psychophysical Modulation of Fringe Visibility in a Distant Double Slit Optical System. And it was published in the journal Physics Essays. Crazy. Psychophysical. So psycho is your mind, physical is like matter. Modulation is, I believe, having an effect or changing things of fringe visibility in a distant double slit optical system. Fringe visibility in a distant double. So basically, they're doing this famous experiment called the double slit experiment, which is an experiment that shows that when you observe an object, it could either be a particle, it could either be a wave or a particle. But they're saying this was done distantly, so far away. So I believe this title is saying that they tested in the experiment that somebody was thinking with their mind, and far away someone was doing this double slit experiment, but their thoughts were having an effect, were changing what was happening. Which, I mean, the implications of that are very big, basically, very big implications. I've always suspected, ever since I started reading paranormal things, that the human mind is incredibly powerful, much more powerful than we're led to believe, like incredibly powerful. And I kind of understand why. I'm not saying anybody knows it and just trying to keep it a secret, but, whenever you think about crazy technologies or crazy science, powerful science, one of the first things I think about is how can it be exploited or used for bad things. For instance, I believe that the human mind is incredibly powerful, so powerful that if used correctly, you could heal somebody who is suffering from an illness. But at the same time, because you could heal somebody with an illness, I believe you could also probably hurt somebody physically. You could hurt somebody and cause them great pain, or maybe even kill them. So I could see why that may be kept secret, because people don't want, people to go around hurting people. But at the same time, I've also read that if you were to hurt somebody or try to hurt somebody with your mind, that would backfire on you and it would hurt your body. So there's a big reason why you would not want to do that. And at the same time, I've also heard that I heard somebody, my friend Stephanie Quick said, that one time the scientist was trying to this researcher was trying to like mentally have an effect on like a president, but when he tried to do that, he saw there were like a lot of psychic bodyguards there protecting the president psychically. So perhaps it's not as easy as that. Perhaps what I'm saying, it's possible to hurt somebody with just your mind, but it's very difficult to do it, and it has bad consequences. Which is, I mean, what I'm saying is basically the same as basically if you wanted to hurt someone a conventional way, physically, with a weapon, that could also be said about that. It is also difficult sometimes to hurt somebody with a weapon, and it has consequences to you. So Melinda says, there's been experiments where people talk nice to plants and they do better. Apparently, it's due to low-level vibrations of your voice when you speak nicely, as opposed to an angry tone. Interesting. Isn't that one of the things you hear about some aliens? They can use telepathy. They're scientifically advanced to us. We just haven't gotten our brains there yet. Yeah, I almost all UFO abduction alien cases, they communicate with telepathy. They put thoughts in your mind or their feelings in your mind. It's true. Perhaps that's not a technology they're using. Perhaps they just understand that aspect of reality better than we do. Okay, interesting. Let's go back to where we were. Let's see. Very cool. Well, I didn't know that, man. That's crazy. These scientists, they got to start opening their mind to these thoughts. I mean, honestly, these scientists, they just remind me of like, the church that was like, there's no way that, the Earth is not the center of the solar system. You know, okay, at the time, yeah, that's what we thought, but the idea that we can't be wrong, that's scary to me. It's scary to me when a scientist, a respected scientist, is like, I don't like that idea you're proposing. I don't think you should. I'm against that idea. I mean, it's okay for me for a scientist to say, I don't think the evidence supports it. I think you may be incorrect. That's fine. That's great. That's what scientific discourse is about. But it's very different to me when the scientist is like, no, you're absolutely wrong. There's no way that could be correct. You need to stop proposing these ideas about extraterrestrial visitors, about black-eyed children, about telepathic abilities. That is dangerous to me. That's unscientific. It's okay to disagree, but to have this like hard objection where you just think it's dangerous for us to think about this, like, I don't know, and making fun of it, I don't know. I'm on the fence. I mean, yeah, you can make fun of some ideas, that's okay, I guess. There's nothing really that wrong with making fun of something, but it just shows me that you're not really open-minded. I don't know. Let's see. Where were we? Physical. Oh wait, I think we're over here. Here we go. We were right here. Okay, let's catch up on some comments. Okay, Melinda also pipes in and says, and there's an old wives' tale out there, okay? Your nose itches or your ears burn when someone's talking about you. So maybe we're picking up on that because we're all connected. Yeah, that's interesting. I've heard a lot of stories about someone. Okay, so recently we went to a church. Me and my mother went to a church we hadn't been to in a long time. We used to live close to it. And when we got there, the pastor was talking to the congregation with his wife. And they were like, you know what? We were just talking about you guys. We had just started talking about, I wonder what happened to, Wild Trees and his mother and Wild Tree's girlfriend. Well, we broke up since then. But weird coincidence. And yeah, a lot of times, yeah, I feel like I'm thinking about somebody. I start thinking about somebody and they just call me randomly. So I think there's something going on there. These are really interesting thoughts. These are interesting thoughts because they are new thoughts. They go against what we were led to believe. And the implications of these thoughts are really wild. Really wild. Mainstream university researchers probably don't want to look like a crackpot to their peers, and it's hard to get research grants for the topic. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I said the main reason why the paranormal does not advance, the main reason in current times why the paranormal does not advance scientifically is because of money. Because the way that academic researchers get their money is through grants. The money, these projects take years to do. They take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. They take a lot of people, and they take a lot of money to do. Where does the money come from? It comes from the government or from research organizations. Those grants you cannot pick what you want to do with that money. They tell you what to do with that money. They're like, we're offering all this money for you as a scientist to do a project, but you have to do this project on this topic, like cats. You have to study this virus. You have to study this ecosystem. And right now, nobody is offering money for any paranormal topics, so no scientists are doing it because it's expensive. And it has to come from these university researchers because they're the ones that publish their research. Like what we're reading right now, this is public. This is not secret information. this paper was published, and now I'm reading it, and you're finding out about it. There are other scientists out there that work for a company or for the government. Okay, so they get money to do research, and I believe that governments and private organizations, like companies, are doing paranormal research, but they keep it secret. They keep it secret so we don't find out about it. But yeah, it's a really crazy system we have there. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then the above views do not prove, in quotes, that psi phenomenon exists, but it makes them plausible. Look, I like the scientist. The scientist is like having a very measured approach. You know, he's not being fanatical about his psi ability. This statement is very, parsimonious. Yeah, he's saying, what we just discussed, it doesn't prove it, but it opens the door to psi phenomena being possible. And some physicists have proposed specific theories for them. They are also a response to psychologists who state that they another I think there's like a little typo. They are also a response to psychologists who state that psi phenomena are impossible. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so he's saying that what we just read, that's a good response to any psychologist or scientist, for that matter, that says that psi phenomenon is impossible, what we just read. And in parentheses, he says, parapsychologists believe in impossible things. Psi conflicts with what we know to be true about the world. Interesting. Okay. Melinda says it would be worthy to try to seek money from various billionaires who have money to burn and have the interest in the topic. Better chance to get that route than the government grants. Well, Melinda, you're very right. I know of one billionaire who is doing this. Let me look them up for you. And they have done this. So this billionaire is called Robert Bigelow. Let's see, Afterlife Research Award. So he recently did this. Robert Bigelow. I'm going to try. I don't want to just misquote what he did, but here we go. So Robert Bigelow, he's a billionaire who made his money with hotel chain, and he has this Bigelow Institute, whose mission is to communicate, facilitate, and educate and organize scientific research and exploration into the survival of human consciousness, or life after death is another way of saying it. And here we have an article. He gave money for essays that describe this life after death. And Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove actually won the money. So here we go. So all 29 winning constant essays are published here. So his organization, BIX, is proud to publish for the first time all 29 winning essays from the 2021 essay competition. None of these essays have been previously published. The essays represent a completely novel body of work that were written specifically for this essay contest. Anyway, so yeah, maybe we'll read the first one. But yeah, here's the first one. Jeffrey Mishlove wrote the first prize essay. He won $500,000. And his essay was called Beyond the Brain, The Survival of Human Consciousness After Permanent Bodily Death. And we can read that paper here. Second place was $300,000 by Pim Van Lommel, a medical doctor. The continuity of consciousness, a concept based on scientific research on near-death experiences during cardiac arrest. We should read these papers. And third place was Leo Rickaby, PhD, A Ghost in the Time Machine. And he won $150,000. So yeah, Dr. Bigelow with his Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies is an example. But we need more. We need more scientists to do that. Cool. Interesting. All right, back to the paper. Yeah, Melinda says, that's cool about Bigelow. Yeah, let me post a link up there for people if they want to read it. later on. Let's see. Put it over here. And here's the link right here in the chat. There's a link right there if you want to read these essays, and we could read them later too. And there's a lot of research out there on paranormal topics. I don't think I'll ever run out of things to talk about. But yeah, there's that paper. But yeah, Melinda, you're I said this before, but Melinda, you're very intelligent. You're a great researcher. Your mind is very sharp, and you're very good. You're always ahead of the curve. And so for those reasons, I'm so thankful that you're here in the chat and that you're participating in our discussion of these topics. Okay, so now some more theories on psychological. And Melinda says, thank you very much. You're welcome very much as well. Okay, so now we're going to read this section. It says, psychological and evolutionary theories of psi. Okay, cool. This is what I'm a biologist. Finally, let's talk about evolution. What is evolution? Look, I really don't think it's that complicated of an idea. I don't think it's that controversial of an idea. Perhaps the way that it works is very complex, and we're still figuring some of that out. But basically, to me, evolution is just the change of organisms through time, through a large amount of time. Well, not necessarily a large amount of time, because some organisms reproduce very quickly, like bacteria. So the time that is needed for evolution is a function of how fast an organism can reproduce. Okay, so there's some animals out there, like an alligator gar, which is one of my favorite animals. The alligator gar, I think, takes about several decades to reproduce. So let's look this up. How long for an alligator gar to reproduce? So the alligator gar is one of the largest freshwater fish in the world, definitely in North America. It's remained basically unchanged. It looks just like a dinosaur. It's been around hundreds of millions of years. But yeah, here it says alligator gar are different. Female alligator gar can live more than 50 years and are capable of reproducing at 5 to 10 years, and reproduce only a few times each decade in most Texas waters. To successfully reproduce, alligator gar require large overbank floods during the spring and early summer. So yeah, I mean, alligator gar are an example of a fish or an organism that takes a long time to reproduce. I mean, 5 to 10 years. Whereas bacteria, there's some bacteria that can reproduce several times within an hour. This is what these boys look like, boys and girls. They're actually very sweet. They look dangerous, but I don't think there's really been any accounts of them attacking people. They are piscivorous, so they mainly eat fish. And they have 2 rows of teeth on the top of their mouth. They eat small mammals, but I think you could swim with one. I mean, I would swim with one of them. People do swim with like a 10-footer, an 8-foot alligator gar, and they're not going to attack you. They seem to have a sweet, intelligent personality. But anyway, so yeah, evolution, it's just a change of an organism through time. I mean, we understand that, you look different than your parents do. You look different than your grandparents do at a very small scale. I mean, that's evolution. Organisms, they just change through time. That's what evolution is to me. Melinda, we used to have an alligator gar in the biology department in a tank in one of the common areas. They were very cool. Yeah, I love alligator gar. Let's see. Okay. 2 psychological theories: psi-mediated instrumental response, or PMIR, from Stanford in 2015, or by the scientist Stanford, and first sight theory seek to integrate psi with psychological and evolutionary theories. Okay, so there's 2 psychological theories out there. One called psi-mediated instrumental response, and the other one called first sight theory. And then these theories are trying to integrate psi with psychological and evolutionary theories. Okay, so they're trying to make a branch between evolution, psychology, and psi abilities. Okay, so there's two different theories out there. Okay. Although varying in details, both propose that psi information continuously, although usually non-consciously, impinges on mental processes and may serve adaptive and or personal inclinations. Fascinating. This is what I thought they were going to say. Okay. Both of them propose that psi information continuously, although usually non-consciously, impinges on mental processes and may serve. Oh, damn. That's crazy. Let's see. I just want to make sure I know what impinges means. That's a pretty crazy implication. Well, let's see. Let's do another definition here. Have an effect or impact, especially a negative one. Okay. Have an effect or an impact on. Yeah, so I think what they're saying is that all this psi stuff that's happening, all this information, this telepathic, clairvoyant information, it's continuously, it's always, but not usually consciously, like in the back of your mind, it's always having an impact on your mental processes. That's so fascinating. So basically it's saying that you're constantly subconsciously interacting in your mind with the psi information, and it's always happening. And the reason why is because it have an adaptive purpose where it helps you survive better, or personal inclinations. That's crazy. That's an interesting thought. If I'm understanding that correctly, yeah, it means that all the time everybody's receiving the psi information, although usually subconsciously. That makes sense. I gotta say that makes sense, but that is a crazy thought. All right. PMIR, which is the one called psi-mediated instrumental response, has been the basis for studies in which rewarding psi tasks embedded within non-psi experiments were found to affect performance in experiments. Okay. So it's been the basis for studies in which rewarding psi tasks embedded with non-psi experiments were found to affect performance in experiments. Okay, that's pretty deep. I'm kind of processing that. Okay. But they're going to talk more about this here in a section below. They're going to explain that in a section on implicit anomalous cognition. Okay. A premise of PMIR is that an organism may respond to events outside of its sensory reach if it will respond to them if they were perceivable. Oh, okay. I think I get what this author is saying. A premise of PMIR is that an organism, like a human or a cat, may respond to events outside of its sensory reach. Sensory reach is like your senses. So we may respond to something happening that we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot smell, we cannot touch. It's like far away. We can't respond to it if it would respond to them if they were perceivable. Okay, so like if something is happening that I would normally respond to, like my child being sick, but my child is far away, I might still respond to them. I think that's what it's saying. Talking about Bobby Dizzle. Psi theories, Melinda says, psi theories go along with people who are empaths, it seems. I am one and get overwhelmed when around people in public. I can pick up a lot of energy from people, can bring me down and wear me out. Interesting. Okay, so here's an example. Such as avoiding unperceivable dangerous situation. Here's another example. So it's saying that, let's say, here's an example. You would normally avoid a dangerous situation if you were to perceive it. So if you were walking down the street and you saw a fire in the middle of the sidewalk, that's a dangerous situation, and you would probably avoid that. You would perceive it, you would see it with your eyes, and you would be like, I am not going near this fire. You would turn around. So that means that if you were close enough, you would avoid it. You would interact with it, and you would avoid it. So perhaps if something is happening far away or in the future, like that fire, because you would avoid it normally, you would also avoid it with psi ability. So you might not go walking that day. You might have a premonition, I shouldn't go walking down the sidewalk. And it's because there's going to be a fire there. That's so crazy. So crazy. Because, I'm getting, my ears are pricking up because this has a lot to do with evolution and with biology. It has a lot to do with that. And now my head is spinning, the gears are turning, thinking about what the implications are for organisms and for evolution. Okay. And there is a motivational component to what the organism will likely attend to depending on its particular dispositions and schemata. Whoa. Schemata. What is schemata? A schemata. Representation of a plan or theory in the form of a model or outline. Oh, okay. There is a motivational component to what the organism will likely attend to depending on its particular dispositions or schemata or plan or outline. Okay. Similarly, according to the first sight model, psi is not limited to the commonsensical view of time and space, and is fundamental to all organisms. Okay. So based on this first sight model, the first thing, according to it, is that psi is not limited by the commonsensical view of time and space. Okay, so it goes outside our common sense view of time and space, and that it's fundamental to all organisms. This is what's interesting. Yeah, it's not just humans. Basically, everything that's alive, a living thing, can have psi. Okay, and B, it mostly operates non-consciously, but may affect consciousness. Interesting. Cool. Oh, I think I have to go over here. Interesting. Up here. And act in accordance with the organism's dispositions. Wow, that's crazy. Okay. All right, Melinda says, the people who are better at picking up dangerous situations via psi would survive better and therefore pass on these abilities to their offspring. Yeah, that's basically how evolution works. One of the components of how we think evolution works is if you have an adaptation that helps you survive better, well, then you're more likely to survive. And if you're more likely to survive, you're more likely to have children. And if you have children, you're more likely to pass on to those children your adaptations genetically, like psi ability. Interesting. All right. There are also explanations of why alterations of consciousness have been found to relate to psi. Okay. According to the noise reduction theory, psi information is subtle and likely to remain non-conscious in the midst of the overwhelming information provided by the senses and bodily actions unless these inputs are reduced. This is fascinating as well. Okay, so basically they're saying that all organisms, not just humans, are always receiving information, which is true. We're always being stimulated, like we're eating food, we're tasting it, we're we're listening to a podcast and listening to the radio at the same time. Someone is talking to us. Like all this information is coming in our brain. That's a bunch of noise. And so in order to pick up on this psi information, this useful information about the future or about something far away, we need to reduce all that noise. We need to quiet down our senses so we can pick up on it. That's interesting. And they're saying that, yeah, we need to reduce these inputs. So okay. So now it makes sense why meditation helps us with our psi ability, because meditation is a form of noise reduction. Meditation is a way of canceling out all of this stuff in our brain, and then we can just concentrate on these messages or this information we're receiving for psi. This is making a lot of sense to me now. Okay. Thus, procedures that reduce these stimuli, such as meditation or hypnosis and Ganzfeld, should facilitate awareness of psi. See the sections on Ganzfeld and dream research below. Here's a word. I don't think anybody knows what this word means, but it has to do with meditation and hypnosis. What the heck is Ganzfeld? Ganzfeld. I'm curious, Melinda, have you ever heard Ganzfeld? Here we go. A technique of controlled sensory input used in parapsychology with the aim of improving results in tests of telepathy and other paranormal phenomenon. Okay, so this is something that just has to do with parapsychology. A technique of controlled sensory input where you control what someone is taking in. Interesting. Oh. Does the Ganzfeld? Someone asks, does the Ganzfeld effect actually work? Consistent independent replication of Ganzfeld experiments has not been achieved, and in spite of strenuous arguments by parapsychologists to the contrary, there is no validated evidence accepted by the wider scientific community for the existence of any parapsychological phenomenon. This is from Wikipedia. I gotta say, I cannot say this with definitive certainty, but I believe Wikipedia has a really strong bias against any paranormal topic. They really do. Because this comment right here, it seems to be contradicted by what we're reading right now. Look what it says. Look, Wikipedia says right here that this statement, there is no validated evidence accepted by the wider scientific community for the existence of any parapsychological phenomenon. Well, okay, maybe they're getting away with this statement, accepted by the wider scientific community. I mean, that's true for anything, though. I mean, any evidence we have scientifically that's been published, like the paper we're reading, no matter how many papers we have, as of current time, the wider scientific community does not accept it. I mean, that's just the way it is. That doesn't mean that it's not true. That is more of a function, or that's more caused by time, by the time that we're in right now in society. We're in a time in society where the majority of the scientists view these parapsychological phenomenon as not being accepted because maybe the evidence is just starting to build up. But anyway, that's what it is. That's crazy. Okay. Besides restrictions of sensory input, alterations in consciousness may make awareness of psi more likely by reducing critical thoughts and stimulating a sense of interconnectedness. That's crazy. Okay. So yeah, once again, they're saying that these are things that can help you with your psi ability. Meditation, hypnosis, and Ganzfeld. And they're also saying that noise reduction. And they're saying here that reducing critical thought, which is a lot of times, I always say people should think critically, but apparently if you want to get psi ability, you should not think critically. and stimulating a sense of interconnectedness. These are the things that will help you with your psi ability. Interesting. Very cool. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Psi has also been discussed from an evolutionary perspective. According to Broughton in 2015, psi should be seen in the larger context of biological processes, including brain functioning and evolution. He stated that psi is a correlation between future and previous events that could have been maintained, even providing as little as 1% fitness advantage. Yeah, so this is what we're talking about. This is what Melinda was saying. Okay. So they're saying that psi ability, it can be maintained, or it's something that organisms can still have, even if it just provided a 1% fitness advantage. Okay, what does this 1% fitness advantage means? Okay. When we start talking about biology and evolution, when we say fitness, it does not mean what we may think it means. You know, a lot of people think, oh, fitness, it means you're healthy. It means you're working out and you're eating right. Well, yes, it does mean that. But in evolution, fitness is basically a number. Fitness is a number. Every organism has a fitness number. Okay. The fitness number can be 0 and it could go up all the way into the thousands. Okay. I don't believe it could be negative, but let's just say it could be from 0 to 100 or to millions, depending on what organism you are. Anyway, this is what definition is. The definition of fitness is definition of fitness is how many healthy children do you have that can also produce more children, that are fertile, basically. So if you have, if a cat has a litter of kittens, and those kittens there's 10 of them, and all of those kittens are healthy and they can all reproduce, and then that cat has a fitness number of 10. Okay. Now, if a horse and a donkey have a child, and that child is a mule, well, that mule is infertile and it cannot reproduce. So even though that horse and that donkey had one child, their fitness number is still 0, because that child, the mule, cannot reproduce. Okay. So what they're saying here is that, look, to me, it just sounds like not very impressive or not very mind-blowing, and it sounds boring. But from what I've understood, it seems like the meaning of life is to increase your fitness. What is the meaning of life? It seems to me that every living organism, the reason why they're alive, everything they do is to increase their fitness. I mean, in other words, the meaning of life is to have as many healthy children that can also have children. That's it. That's the meaning of life. So what they're saying here is that if you having psi ability, it increases your fitness number by as little as 1%. So it increases the number of healthy children you have that can also have children by as little as 1%. They're saying, like, look, that's enough for you to like have psi ability. That little advantage. Because once again, like I said, to me, every living organism, everything they do, every action, when they're flying in the sky, they're crawling in the dirt, they're eating something, they're dancing, everything they're doing, it's to increase their fitness. That seems to be what happens. I mean, humans are a little more complex, you know, but other organisms that are not humans, it seems that's what they're trying to do. So this small effect could subtly affect decisions through hunches and similar mechanisms, consistent with the small effects found in research. Okay. Research and observations in nature support the existence of psi in other species. Okay, so there's these papers by Safina and Sheldrake that show that that other animals can have psi abilities. Okay, let's see. I gotta see what the name of these papers are. Okay, so there's this paper called Beyond Words: What Animals Think and Feel that was published. Okay, apparently that paper has to do with animals having psi ability. Let's see what the other paper was. Okay, the other paper is this one right here. Psi in everyday life, non-human and human. Oh, okay. And that was published in Parapsychology, a handbook for the 21st century. That sounds like a book. Okay. Crazy. All right, where was I? Four. Open up here. Okay. As to statements such as the only that as the one okay. As to statements such as the one by cognitive scientist by a cognitive scientist that accepting psi phenomenon. Let me start all over again. As to statements such as the one by a cognitive scientist that accepting psi phenomenon would, in quotes, send all of science as we know it crashing to the ground, the most sensible answer is that psi phenomena are compatible with some interpretations by eminent physicists and manifest small effects that in no way invalidate the accomplishments of current science. Okay. So what he's saying here is that, like, if we accept psi, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Calm down. We could integrate it and work it into what we've already discovered. All the accomplishments of current scientists, they don't have to come crashing to the ground. Okay. The Office of Technology Assessment report concluded that it is important to find out how psi can obtain a, in quotes, fairer hearing across a broader spectrum of the scientific community, so that emotionality does not impede objective assessment of experimental results. Yeah, I mean, a lot of scientists are very emotional when they talk about paranormal topics, as it has to do with scientists. What are these emotions? They're anger, ridicule, trying to shame people, cause people to be embarrassed. Those emotions, they shouldn't be in science. Science should have to do with experimental results. Anyway, well, I think we made a lot of progress on the paper. The next section is summary of meta-analysis on psi. This is where we're going to talk about basically what all the results of all these previous experiments have shown on psi. But yeah, I think we'll take a break here for today. I guess I'll be back on Tuesday. I'm going to try so hard to get my slides up for Tuesday for entomology. I'm going to try to work on them this weekend so we could have that class on entomology. And if that is true, then we will have gaming on Thursday. We'll finish Limbo. And then on Sunday, we will continue this paper. Okay, and then Melinda says, what about birds and other taxon detecting earthquakes before we can? Hypotheses put forward include that they detect magnetic deviations in the earth as early indicators of quake, but what if? Yeah, what if? I wonder. I don't know. These organisms are using psi possible hypothesis. Yeah, so Melinda is saying that she's taking information that has already been out there, but it has not been fully explained. The information is, birds and other animals seem to detect earthquakes before we can. We don't know why. We know they can, but we don't know why. So one of the explanations is that they could detect magnetic deviations in the earth as an early indication. But her new hypothesis, what if they're using psi? So the hypothesis Melinda is proposing is birds and other taxon detect earthquakes before humans can because they're using psi abilities. That can be tested. And Melinda says, yay, entomology. Yeah, I'm excited. Let's get this party started. I will email you the textbook, Melinda, before the class starts, so you can share it with your friend who wants to also take the class. Here is my email for text 4. I'm going to put it up here. Free textbook information. chat. So yeah, email me at wild7trees@gmail.com for free textbook information on entomology. And it could just be a nice little resource for you to read or go along with the class. I'm going to make slides based on this textbook, and I think I'm just going to cover the whole textbook. A lot of times when you take an entomology class, they base it on a textbook, but they don't go through everything. They miss sections for time, but I have all the time in the world. So I'm going to cover everything in the textbook. Great read tonight. See you next time. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Oh, thank you for that. That's very sweet, Melinda. Yeah, I enjoyed reading it. It's so much fun having you on these chats, Melinda. It's great having this dialogue go back and forth and process this information. And this is a very thick paper, but I mean, it's got a lot of good, it cites a lot of real research, and it's really convincing me that, there is something to psi. And it's, I don't know, it's good for conversation at a bar or something. Well, thank you very much, Belinda. Have a good Labor Day weekend. Everybody else, have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you for watching this today and in the future. Give this video a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what you think about psi ability. Which animal do you think has the most psi potential? And have a great evening and weekend and Labor Day weekend, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you. Take care. See you later.